My wife screamed, "I'm not sleeping with you anymore. Deal with it." So I dealt with it by dismantling everything she thought was secure. The night my wife told me she was done sleeping with me, I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't even argue. I just looked her dead in the eye and said one word. Okay. What she didn't know was that single word was about to cost her everything. But let me back up, because the story of how I dismantled my own marriage to save myself starts way before that Tuesday night in October. My name's Nathan, 32 years old, and I work as an electrician for a commercial outfit here in Ohio. Been doing it for about 9 years now, licensed journeyman, and I'm good at what I do. There's something satisfying about working with your hands, solving problems that have actual solutions, dealing with systems that follow logical rules. Wires either work or they don't. Circuits either complete or they break. Unlike relationships, apparently, I started out as an apprentice right after high school because college wasn't really my thing, and I wanted to actually make something with my life instead of drowning in student debt for a degree I'd never use. Spent 4 years learning the trade under some of the best electricians in the state, guys who'd been doing this work since before I was born and knew every trick in the book. By 25, I had my journeyman license, and by 27, I was running my own crews on commercial projects. I bought my first house that same year, a modest 3-bedroom ranch in a decent neighborhood with a garage big enough to work on projects and a backyard with actual grass instead of the patchy dirt lots you see in most starter homes. Drove a paid-off pickup truck that got me where I needed to go without making monthly payments. Nothing flashy, just solid and reliable. I was the guy who showed up early, did his job right the first time, and never left a customer hanging. Same approach I brought to my marriage. My wife Leah and I had been married for 6 years, and for the first 4, I genuinely thought we were one of those couples who'd actually figured it out. We had our little routines, our inside jokes, our Friday night tradition of trying new restaurants, and rating them like we were food critics with scorecards and everything. Our Sunday morning coffee ritual, where we just sit on the back porch and talk about nothing and everything at the same time while Bruno, our neighbor's dog, would come visit through the fence. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and I believed we were building something that would last forever. We met at a friend's wedding reception back when I was 24 and still figuring out what I wanted from life. She was a bridesmaid. I was there as a +1 for my buddy Craig, who was in the wedding party. She laughed at my dumb jokes about the DJ's playlist and his obsession with playing the cha-cha slide every 30 minutes, like it was some kind of legal requirement for weddings. I bought her a Sprite, and we ended up talking until the venue staff started stacking chairs around us like we weren't even there. She told me about her job, her dreams of traveling, her weird obsession with true crime podcasts that she was almost embarrassed to admit. I told her about my work, my truck, my plans to buy a house one day. Nothing earth-shattering, just 2 people connecting over the ordinary stuff that actually matters when you're building a life together. Got her number, called her the next day instead of waiting the recommended 3 days because who has time for games? And we were basically inseparable after that. Leah worked in human resources for a healthcare company downtown, the kind of job where she dealt with people's problems all day and came home drained from managing everyone else's drama. Complaints about managers, disputes over vacation time, the occasional accusation of harassment that she had to investigate. I got that it was exhausting. My job was physical, hers was emotional, and we balanced each other out. At least that's what I thought. The first few years of marriage felt like an extension of dating, just with shared bills and a mortgage. We'd cook dinner together, arguing about whose turn it was to chop vegetables. We'd binge shows on the couch until midnight, even though we both had work in the morning. We'd take road trips to nowhere in particular just because we could. Then somewhere around year 5, things started shifting in ways I couldn't quite put my finger on at first. Like when you notice a crack in the wall, but convince yourself it's nothing serious. A hairline fracture that could be nothing, or could be a sign the whole foundation is compromised. Leah started coming home later from work, started spending more time on her phone with this weird protective angle where I couldn't see the screen, started canceling our weekend plans with vague excuses about being tired or needing alone time. The Friday night dinners became every other week, then once a month, then maybe next week, indefinitely. I tried talking to her about it multiple times, asking if something was wrong, if work was stressing her out, if there was anything I could do to help. I suggested we take a vacation, get away from everything for a week. I offered to take over more household stuff so she could relax, but she'd always brush me off with the same line about just being overwhelmed and needing space. I gave her that space. I really did, because I thought that's what a good husband does, but I was just giving her room to drift further away. Then her best friend Bridget entered the picture in a much bigger way. Now, Bridget had always been around. They'd been friends since college, roommates junior year, bridesmaids at each other's weddings. She was that kind of friend who always had opinions about everyone else's life while hers was a certified disaster. But suddenly, she was over at our house constantly, like 3 or 4 nights a week, and their conversations would stop the second I walked into the room. Here's the thing about Bridget that I need you to understand. She'd been divorced 3 times, and somehow convinced herself that this made her an expert on relationships, rather than someone who clearly couldn't maintain one. Every time she showed up, she and Leah would disappear into the bedroom or go out on the patio, and I'd hear these hushed, intense conversations that would stop the second I came anywhere near. After each visit from Bridget, Leah would be noticeably colder to me, more distant, more dismissive of anything I said or did. It was like Bridget was slowly poisoning her against me, dripping little bits of toxic advice into her ear about how she deserved better, how marriage was just settling, how men are all the same. Eventually, I started calling Bridget the marriage killer in my head, because everywhere she went, relationships seemed to die. Her first husband left her after she cheated on him with his brother at a family barbecue. Classy. Second marriage lasted 11 months before he caught her draining their joint account for shopping sprees she was hiding in the trunk of her car. Third one was some guy she met in Vegas and married after knowing him for 3 weeks, which ended predictably when he turned out to be still married to someone else in another state. And this was the woman my wife was taking relationship advice from. The one she trusted more than me to tell her what was wrong with her life. By month 6 of this downward spiral, Leah had checked out of our marriage completely. We went from sleeping in the same bed every night to her claiming she needed the guest room because I apparently snored too loud, which was news to me after 5 years of her never mentioning it. She'd even bought one of those white noise machines and earplugs before we got married because she was a light sleeper. So the snoring excuse didn't hold up under any scrutiny. She stopped asking about my day, stopped laughing at my jokes, stopped initiating any kind of physical contact. I'd reach for her hand and she'd find a reason to move it. I'd try to kiss her goodbye in the morning and she'd turn her head so I got her cheek. I'd suggest we watch a movie together and she'd say she was too tired, then spend 3 hours scrolling through her phone. I tried everything I could think of to reconnect with her. I planned a surprise weekend getaway to this cabin in the mountains she'd always wanted to visit, the one she'd bookmarked on her laptop and showed me pictures of a dozen times. Booked it 2 months in advance, requested time off work, even bought new hiking boots for both of us, and packed a picnic basket. She canceled last minute saying she had too much work, but I saw on her Instagram story later that she'd gone to brunch with Bridget that same Saturday. I bought her this beautiful necklace for our anniversary that I'd been saving up for, 3 months of setting aside a little from each paycheck. Real gold, small diamond, nothing crazy but something meaningful. She barely looked at it before putting it in a drawer and saying thanks, in a tone that made it clear she didn't care. Still sitting in that drawer when I left. Probably still there now for all I know. I suggested we take a cooking class together, something she'd mentioned wanting to do back when we were dating. She laughed and said that sounded like something old couples do when they're trying to save a dying marriage. The irony of that statement wasn't lost on me. Every attempt I made to save our marriage was met with either indifference or outright hostility. And I was starting to feel like I was living with a stranger who just happened to look like my wife. Then the really obvious signs started appearing. The kind you can't ignore even if you want to. Leah suddenly had a whole new wardrobe of clothes I'd never seen her buy. Tighter dresses and outfits that seemed designed for someone else's eyes, not mine. Stuff she'd never worn around the house, just appearing and disappearing from the closet. She changed her hairstyle to something more dramatic, shorter and edgier, and started wearing makeup to work when she'd always been more of a natural look person. The kind of transformation that happens when someone's trying to impress someone new. Her phone became like a third party in our marriage, always there. Always demanding her attention, always more important than anything I had to say. She'd guard it like it contained nuclear launch codes, taking it into the bathroom with her, sleeping with it under her pillow, never leaving it unattended for even a second. Even when she showered, she'd bring it into the bathroom and set it on the counter where she could see it through the glass door. She started having these networking events that required her to dress up and come home at midnight, smelling like expensive cologne that definitely wasn't mine. I'd see receipts from restaurants we'd never been to together. Charges on our joint credit card for hotels in our own city, which made no sense unless you considered the one explanation I was desperately trying not to consider. And then there was this name that kept popping up. Garrett. Garrett texted her at weird hours. Garrett needed her input on projects at times when normal coworkers wouldn't be working. Garrett seemed to have unlimited access to my wife's time and attention in ways that I no longer did. Every time his name came up, she'd get this look on her face. This little smile she used to give me back when we were first dating. I looked him up on social media once when she was in the shower. Some senior manager type at her company, the kind of guy who wore suits that cost more than my weekly paycheck and had that slick, polished look that screamed, "I've never done an honest day's work in my life." Perfect hair, perfect teeth, standing on some beach in his profile picture like he was auditioning for a cologne commercial. Probably drove some overpriced European car and thought he was God's gift to women. The breaking point came on a Tuesday night in October, a completely ordinary evening that turned into the moment everything changed. I'd made dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta the way she used to like it, with the garlic bread she always requested back when she actually ate meals with me. I'd set the table with the nice plates, lit a candle, hoping maybe we could have an actual conversation for once. Pretend we were still the couple who used to talk for hours about everything and nothing. Leah came home late again, barely acknowledged the food, and went straight to her phone. I asked her as calmly as I could manage if we could please just talk about what was happening between us, because I felt like I was losing her, and I needed to understand why. That's when she looked up at me with this expression I'd never seen before, this mixture of contempt and exhaustion, and said the words that would echo in my head for months. "I'm not sleeping with you anymore, Nathan. That part of our marriage is over. You're basically just my roommate now. Deal with it." The way she said it was so casual, so matter of fact, like she was telling me she decided to switch brands of coffee or something equally insignificant. No discussion, no explanation, no attempt to work through whatever issues she thought we had. Just a unilateral declaration that my role in this marriage had been downgraded from husband to roommate without any input from me. I stood there in our kitchen, looking at this woman I'd promised to love forever, and something inside me just went cold and clear. I didn't yell, I didn't argue, I didn't beg. I just looked at her and said, "Okay," in the calmest voice I've ever used. And then I walked out of the kitchen, went to our bedroom, grabbed my laptop, and started planning. You see, Leah thought, deal with it, meant I'd just accept this new reality, that I'd become her convenient roommate, who paid half the bills while she did whatever she wanted with whoever she wanted. She thought I'd keep being good old reliable Nathan, too boring and predictable to ever do anything unexpected. But what she didn't understand was that I was going to deal with it, just not in any way she expected. I called my best friend Owen that same night, told him I needed a place to crash for a while, and he told me his guest room was mine for as long as I needed it. Owen had been my buddy since high school, the kind of friend who'd help you move a body if you asked without questions. Not that I was planning anything illegal, just someone who had my back unconditionally through thick and thin. That same night, I started moving essential stuff out bit by bit, while Leah was in the other room scrolling through her phone, completely oblivious to the fact that her casual cruelty had just activated a side of me she didn't know existed. Over the next few days, I moved like a ghost through our house, gathering documents, making copies of important papers, taking photos of anything that might be relevant later. Every receipt I could find from the past 6 months, every bank statement, every credit card bill. I photographed her new clothes with the tags still on them, documented the hotel charges, screenshotted the joint account transaction. I opened a separate bank account at a different bank and quietly started redirecting my direct deposit there, leaving just enough in our joint account to cover my half of the bills and avoid raising immediate suspicion. Let her wonder why the account balance wasn't growing like it used to. Then I did something I probably should have done years ago. I sat down and read through our prenuptial agreement, the one we'd signed back when we were young and in love and thought we'd never need it. My dad, who'd been through his own messy divorce before meeting my mom, had insisted on it. At the time, Leah had been offended by the suggestion, but I'd explained it was just protection for both of us, and she'd eventually signed without really reading the details. And there it was, in black and white legalese, the clause that Leah had apparently forgotten about or never bothered to read carefully. In the event of proven infidelity, the unfaithful party forfeits their claim to marital assets and spousal support. My dad had insisted on including it, and young naive me had felt almost guilty about it at the time. But sitting there reading it 6 years later, I felt nothing but cold, calculated gratitude. Leah had just handed me the key to dismantling everything she thought was secure, and she didn't even know it yet. The game had changed, and for the first time in months, I was the one holding all the cards. Living at Owen's place gave me the clarity I desperately needed, and having him there as a sounding board made all the difference in what came next. Owen wasn't just my best friend since freshman year of high school. He was the kind of guy who saw through nonsense instantly and had zero tolerance for people who played games with other people's lives. Worked as a mechanic at a diesel shop, hands always stained with grease, straight shooter who'd tell you if you were being an idiot without sugarcoating it. We'd been through everything together, from high school drama to his own divorce 3 years back, when his ex-wife cleaned out their savings and ran off with her personal trainer. When I told him everything that had been happening, he didn't waste time with sympathy or trying to see both sides. He just looked at me and said, I needed concrete proof before I made any moves. That's when he pulled out this small voice-activated recorder from his desk drawer, the kind you could buy online for like 40 bucks, and told me it was time to stop being naive and start protecting myself. I'd never considered recording Leah. It felt like crossing some line I couldn't uncross. But then I remembered her face when she told me I was just a roommate, and that hesitation disappeared. The car was registered in both our names, and I'd been making half the payments on it, so legally it was as much mine as hers. I planted the recorder in the center console the next morning when I went by the house to grab some more clothes while she was at work, tucked it in the back where she'd never think to look, and then I waited. For 3 days, I got nothing useful. Just her singing along to music badly and making work calls that sounded normal. Standard commute stuff that told me nothing I didn't already know. But on day 4, I hit absolute gold. The kind of evidence that would make any divorce attorney salivate. Bridget was in the car with her, and they were talking like I didn't exist. Like I was some inconvenient obstacle they were strategizing around. Leah's voice came through crystal clear, talking about Garrett. About how he was everything I wasn't. About how being with him made her feel alive again in ways she'd forgotten were possible. About how he actually excited her instead of boring her to death with his predictable routines. She went into detail about their hotel visits, their late dinners, the way he made her feel wanted and special. Then Bridget asked the question that made my blood run cold. Whether Garrett knew Leah was still legally married. Leah laughed and said she told Garrett we were separated and basically divorced already, that I was just dragging my feet on signing papers. The lies so casual, so effortless, like she'd been practicing them for months. But the worst part, the part that really destroyed whatever feelings I had left, was when Bridget asked her directly if she felt guilty. And Leah said no, that she'd stopped feeling guilty months ago because I was boring and predictable, and she deserved someone who excited her, that she'd basically been waiting for an excuse to end things, and Garrett was just the push she needed. She even laughed about how I probably had no idea what was happening right under my nose. I listened to that recording 4 times in Owen's guest room. Each time it hurt a little less and made me more determined. Owen's reaction when I played it for him was exactly what I needed. Pure, unfiltered rage on my behalf. The kind of loyalty that reminds you why some friendships last forever. Dude, he said, cracking his knuckles like he was about to go find Garrett personally. We're gonna bury her in court. He immediately started helping me build a case that would be bulletproof. We created a detailed timeline of everything suspicious. Every late night she'd come home. Every unexplained charge. Every work event that didn't add up. I started screenshotting text messages before Leah could delete them, accessing the cloud backup we shared for family photos, and finding messages she thought she'd erased. Downloading bank statements showing charges to restaurants and hotels I'd never been to. Documenting every single inconsistency in her stories. Owen's girlfriend, Wendy, worked at the same healthcare company as Leah. Different department, but same building. Without me even asking, she started keeping her eyes open and passing along information. Turns out Leah and Garrett weren't exactly subtle at work. Long lunches that lasted 2 hours, leaving at the same time every day, showing up to work together on mornings when she'd told me she was going to the gym early. The whole office knew, apparently. I was the last to find out. Then I got lucky in a way I hadn't expected. Our neighbor across the street, this retired guy named Harold, who sat on his porch most days and saw everything that happened on our block, flagged me down when I came by to grab some tools from the garage one afternoon. Son, I don't know what's going on with you and Leah, he said, looking uncomfortable but determined. But I figured you should know there's been a guy coming by the house when you're not there. Nice car, fancy suits, stays for a couple hours, leaves before you'd normally get home from work. He even had dates written down because Harold was that kind of guy. Kept a little notebook of neighborhood happenings, like he was running his own surveillance operation. Former military, old habits die hard. Showed me entries going back 3 months with times and description. That was the final piece. I took everything to a divorce attorney that Owen recommended, a woman named Patricia, who had a reputation for being ruthless in court, but fair. Former family court judge who'd switched to private practice and knew every trick in the book. When I spread out all my evidence on her desk, the audio recordings, the credit card statements, the timeline, the text message screenshots, Harold's observations with dates and times, she smiled and told me this was the most thorough documentation she'd seen in years from a client who'd put together their own case. She said cases with a prenup and this level of proof were about as close to a guaranteed win as you could get in family court. Patricia walked me through what would happen when I filed. Leah would be served at her workplace, which would be humiliating but necessary to prevent her from hiding assets or destroying evidence once she knew what was coming. The prenup with its infidelity clause meant she'd get nothing. No claim to the house we'd bought together. No spousal support. Just whatever personal items she could prove were solely hers. Patricia asked me if I was sure I wanted to go through with it, because once we filed, there was no going back and things would get ugly fast. I didn't hesitate. I told her to file the papers immediately. 2 days later, Patricia called me with news that made everything real. Leah had been served with divorce papers at her office, right in front of her coworkers during their weekly team meeting. According to the process server, her reaction had been somewhere between shock and complete panic. Face went white, hands started shaking, and she'd had to excuse herself to the bathroom for 20 minutes while the whole office watched. Within an hour of being served, my phone started blowing up. Leah called 17 times in a row, each call going straight to voicemail because I'd blocked her number right after filing. Then she started texting from different numbers. From Bridget's phone, from coworkers' phones. Each message more frantic and desperate than the last. Nathan, please call me, we need to talk about this. You can't be serious right now. This is insane, I didn't do anything wrong. Call me now. Please, Nathan, you're making a huge mistake. She showed up at Owen's apartment that same night, pounding on the door and demanding to talk, screaming about how I couldn't just throw away 6 years of marriage without even discussing it with her first. The irony of that statement wasn't lost on me, considering she'd been throwing away our marriage for months without discussing anything with me. Owen handled it perfectly. He opened the door with his phone already recording video and calmly told her she had 60 seconds to leave the property before he called the cops for harassment and trespassing. She tried to push past him, tried to physically force her way into the apartment, and that's when I stepped into view behind him. The look on her face when she saw me standing there was something I'll never forget. This mixture of desperation and rage and confusion, like she couldn't understand how her boring, predictable husband had suddenly grown a spine. That's when I did something I'd been planning for this exact moment. I pulled out my phone, opened the audio of her conversation with Bridget in the car, and pressed play. Her own voice filled the hallway, talking about Garrett, about lying to him about our marriage status, about how I was boring and she deserved someone better, about feeling no guilt because I was just too predictable to care about. I watched all the color drain from her face as she realized how thoroughly screwed she was. She tried to grab my phone, tried to claim the recording was illegal and wouldn't hold up in court, tried every desperate argument she could think of in the moment. But Owen just calmly stated that we were in a one-party consent state, which meant recordings made in jointly owned property were perfectly legal and admissible in court, and that my attorney had already confirmed everything was above board. Then Bridget showed up because of course she did. Tried to spin this whole situation like I was the villain for documenting my own wife's affair. That's when Owen destroyed her with a single sentence that I wish I'd recorded. You've been divorced 3 times and you're giving marriage advice. That's like taking driving lessons from someone who's totaled every car they've owned. Bridget's face went red and she started sputtering about how Owen didn't know what he was talking about, how Leah deserved to be happy, how I was just too boring to satisfy a woman like her. Owen just laughed and said, "Yeah, and your track record suggests you really know how to pick satisfying relationships. How's husband number 4 treating you?" Oh wait. The confrontation ended with Leah in tears on the hallway floor, Bridget trying to console her while shooting daggers at me, and Owen firmly closing the door on both of them. Inside the apartment, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Complete control over my own life. My phone kept buzzing with messages from Leah's family, particularly her mother, who apparently thought screaming at me through text messages would somehow change my mind or make me feel guilty. According to her, I was a monster for embarrassing Leah at work, a terrible husband who never appreciated what he had, a vindictive man who was ruining her daughter's life over nothing. I saved every single message as they came in, forwarded them all to Patricia for documentation, and then did something that felt incredibly satisfying. I sent Leah's mother the entire evidence package, every recording transcript, every credit card receipt from hotels and restaurants, the timeline with dates and Harold's observations, a summary of what the prenup meant for Leah's financial future, with a simple message that just said, "This is why." She went silent after that. And from what I heard later through mutual friends, she told Leah to sign whatever papers I put in front of her, because fighting this would only make things worse, more public, and way more expensive for everyone involved. The next 3 months were a masterclass in watching someone's life unravel, while mine slowly rebuilt itself from the ground up. Leah's lawyers tried everything they could to fight the prenup, claiming it was signed under duress, or that the infidelity clause was unreasonably harsh, or whatever other legal gymnastics they thought might work. But Patricia shut down every single attempt with the kind of precision that made me grateful I'd hired her. The evidence was too solid. The prenup was ironclad. And most importantly, Leah had no leg to stand on, because she'd been caught red-handed in ways that left zero room for interpretation. Her legal team eventually advised her to just sign the settlement agreement and move on, because dragging this out in court would only cost her more money she didn't have and expose her affair even more publicly than it already was. The actual signing happened at Patricia's office on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, and part of me was dreading seeing Leah again after 3 months of silence between us. She walked into that conference room looking completely different from the woman I'd married. Thinner, older somehow, with dark circles under her eyes, and this defeated posture that would have made me feel sorry for her if I hadn't remembered everything she'd done. She tried the waterworks immediately, crying about how she'd made terrible mistakes and how we could still fix this if I'd just give her one more chance. Talking about how Garrett meant nothing to her, how she'd been confused, how she still loved me and always had. I looked at her across that conference table and felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just this cold indifference that I think hurt her more than any emotional reaction would have. Patricia guided us through the paperwork with professional efficiency, and when it came time for Leah to sign, she hesitated, looking at me one last time like I might suddenly change my mind. I just stared back and waited. She signed. Just like that, 6 years of marriage ended with a signature on a legal document. Less than 30 seconds of pen on paper to dissolve everything we'd built together. What happened to Leah after the divorce was finalized was almost poetic in how everything fell apart for her. Garrett, her exciting affair partner who made her feel so alive, dumped her within 2 weeks of our divorce being finalized. Turns out he was only interested in the thrill of an affair, the forbidden aspect of sneaking around with a married woman. And once she was available and came with the baggage of a messy divorce, he wanted nothing to do with her. Just like that, the guy who was supposedly everything I wasn't decided she wasn't worth the hassle of actually dating. She tried to keep him around from what I heard through mutual friends, calling and texting constantly, showing up at his place unannounced. Even tried to corner him at work until HR got involved and told her to stop or face termination. But he'd already moved on to someone new. And Bridget, her toxic best friend who'd encouraged all of this, completely ghosted her once the drama died down, blocked her number, unfollowed her on social media, wouldn't even acknowledge her in public. Owen's girlfriend Wendy saw them run into each other at a coffee shop a few months later. Bridget pretended she didn't even recognize Leah and walked right past her. Leah ended up moving into a small one-bedroom apartment across town. Her parents were furious with her, but eventually let her stay with them for a few weeks until she found her own place. The apartment was a massive downgrade from the house we'd built our life in. The kind of apartment complex with paper-thin walls and a parking lot full of cars on cinder blocks. Her co-workers all knew about the affair and the divorce. People whispered when she walked by. Garrett wouldn't even make eye contact with her in meetings. She eventually transferred to a different department. Then 3 months later, I heard she got laid off during a round of cuts. Last I heard, she was working at a call center, making half what she used to. Meanwhile, things were moving fast for me. I kept the house since the prenup protected it, but I sold it about 6 months after the divorce was finalized. Got 15 grand over asking price because the market was hot, and I'd kept the place in good shape. Bought a new place across town, a craftsman-style house with a detached garage big enough for a proper workshop. Paid cash for half of it from the house sale. First thing I did was adopt a dog from the local rescue. 3-year-old lab mix named Duke, who'd been returned twice by families who couldn't handle his energy. That dog and I ran 5 miles every morning before work. He slept at the foot of my bed and lost his mind with excitement every time I came home. Owen and I finally pulled the trigger on that side business we'd talked about for years. Started doing electrical work for small commercial projects on weekends. First job was rewiring a buddy's restaurant kitchen after a health inspector flagged some sketchy wiring the previous owner had done. Then, his buddy called about a warehouse. Then, someone else called about a strip mall. Within a year, we had a waiting list 3 months out and had to turn down jobs because we couldn't keep up with demand. We were talking about me going full-time with the business and hiring a crew. Hit the gym hard, dropped 20 pounds, put on muscle, started running a local 5K every month just to have something to train for. Finished in the top 20 my third race. Bought a motorcycle, a used Sportster I found on Craigslist for a steal from some guy going through his own divorce. Spent weekends riding back roads with Owen and a few other guys from work, finding little diners in the middle of nowhere and eating burgers that probably took years off our lives. Started dating again about 4 months after the divorce. Nothing serious at first, just getting back out there and remembering what it felt like to have someone actually want to spend time with me. Met Cassie at a barbecue Owen's girlfriend threw. She was a nurse, worked the emergency room at the hospital downtown, and she'd seen enough chaos in her life to appreciate someone who just showed up and did what he said he was going to do. About 8 months after the divorce, Leah started trying to contact me again. First, it was a simple text asking how I was doing. Ignored it. Then longer messages about how she'd realized what she threw away. Ignored those too. Then she showed up at my new house unannounced on a Saturday afternoon. I was in the garage working on the motorcycle when I heard a car pull up. Walked out wiping my hands on a rag, and there she was, standing in my driveway looking like she hadn't slept in a week. Hair unwashed, clothes wrinkled, that same desperate energy I'd seen the night she showed up at Owen's apartment. Nathan, please, can we just talk? Nothing to talk about. I made a mistake, the biggest mistake of my life. I know that now. She took a step toward me, and I held up my hand to stop her. You should go, Leah. I lost everything. My job, my apartment lease is up next month. Bridget won't even talk to me anymore. Garrett blocked me on everything. I have nowhere to go. My parents said I can stay with them, but they look at me like I'm a stranger. I just looked at her. This woman who'd told me I was boring, who'd said I was just her roommate, who'd laughed about me to her friend while she was sneaking around with another man, who'd made me feel like I was the problem for caring too much. Duke came trotting out of the garage and sat next to me, watching her like he was sizing up a threat. Good boy. Sounds like you should have thought about that before you blew up your life. Please, Nathan. I'm begging you. Can't we just start over? I'll do anything. I'll sign a post-nup. I'll change, whatever you want. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I'm asking anyway. That's when another car pulled into my driveway. Cassie's Honda. Cassie got out, took one look at the situation, and walked over to stand next to me. She didn't say anything. Didn't need to. Just slipped her hand into mine and waited. Leah's face went through about 6 different emotions watching that happen. Who is this? This is Cassie, my girlfriend. Cassie gave her a little wave. Nice to meet you. I've heard a lot about you. The way she said it made it clear exactly what she'd heard. Leah stood there for another 10 seconds, looking back and forth between us, then got in her car and left without another word. I never saw her again after that. That was about a year ago. Cassie and I got engaged 3 months later. I proposed at the top of this hiking trail we'd done on our 3rd date, the one where she'd twisted her ankle and I'd carried her the last half-mile back to the car. She said yes before I even finished asking the question. We're getting married next spring. Small ceremony, just close friends and family. Owen's my best man. Duke's the ring bearer because Cassie insisted. Last week I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. Turned out to be Leah's mom. Nathan, I know I have no right to ask, but Leah is really struggling. She's been staying with us and she's not doing well. She lost another job last month. Is there any chance you could talk to her? Just as a friend? She keeps saying you're the only one who ever really understood her. I read it twice, showed it to Cassie, who just shook her head and said, "That woman has some nerve." Then I blocked the number and went back to watching the game with my dog at my feet and my future wife next to me. Some doors stay closed for a reason. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks.